third week of I still can't get used to it. The third week of the preseason, thank God there isn't a fourth week. The third week, Amen. The final week of the preseason, let's just call it that, is upon us. A couple of games last night. And this weekend, I think, is perhaps the best example of how preseason has changed dramatically because, it used to be the fourth game of the preseason. It was all the backups, no starters. Very, very rarely did a starter make even, a cameo appearance. And the third week was the dress rehearsal. Now the third week / final week of the preseason, you don't know what you're going to get. You're getting starters against backups in a lot of these games. That's what we saw in both games played last night. And it makes it very hard to glean anything from exactly what transpired because, hey, the Colts look pretty good. And their starters played against the Philadelphia Eagles backups. So, and every team's got a different objective, a different agenda, a different level of preparation for their key players. And you strike that balance. Do we want to keep our best players out of harm's way? Well, we'd like to, but at the same time, we need our best players to get better. That would be why the Colts would play their starters, and that would be why a team like the Eagles, who are already one of the dominant teams in the NFC, would not. So I have a hard time enjoying the last week of the preseason when there's this built-in imbalance in the games because I want something that simulates real competition. And I know it is at some level real competition. The guys out there are competing, but I mean, come on, it's not ones against ones. It's not best against best.
Well, it's glorified practice, right? And that's kind of why I, in many ways, understand why some coaches are like, yeah, we want the structure of a joint practice where we know it's good on good. We get different situations and different things like that. But like you said, different teams have different objectives for this last week of the preseason. It makes sense for Anthony Richardson, who is coming into this league without a lot of playing experience at quarterback in college in particular, right? He needs as many reps as possible. And the Colts have been very clear that they want him playing as much as possible so that he develops, so that he gets better. So by that standard and by that agenda, right, it makes absolute sense that Anthony Richardson would be out there playing the entire first half. Now, when you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, they weren't even playing some of their backups, right? Jalen Carter is a guy who is ostensibly rotating in that first group, but he was out there in street clothes. That's really kind of a second string defensive tackle, as we look at it at this point. So there's a lot of different things that are going on there, but I think if you look at what Anthony Richardson was able to do last night, as we are right now, you can see the traits that he has that the Colts are excited about. Because, this guy is a stellar athlete. He's got a rocket arm. And if they can harness all of that and make him grow into being a franchise quarterback, then yeah, the Colts are probably going to be on their way.
You got my attention there when you said he's got a rocket arm, because when you said rocket, I'm so used to hearing Sims say he's got a rocket up his ass. I thought that's what you were going to say, which would have been very uncharacteristic for you, but completely in character for Chris Sims.
Yeah.
3 scoring drives last night for Anthony Richardson. He had 38 yards rushing on 5 carries. We saw a nice little run he had there to the left sideline and knew to get out of bounds, wasn't going to try to be a hero, wasn't going to put himself in harm's way, already taking coaching about the importance of preserving his body. And he completed 6 of 17 passes. Now, that's not a stellar completion percentage, 78 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, but 3 scoring drives. Again, it was against backups for the Philadelphia Eagles, but still, he needs the reps. He needs the playing experience. He needs to get comfortable, and there are various levels of comfort that he will reach. He just needs to have the basic level as the regular season approaches, especially since, and we'll talk about this later in the program, he may not have Jonathan Taylor on the field with him. So let's get him ready. Let's get him comfortable as he can be, but let's get him out of the game before he gets injured, and he eventually yielded to the former Eagle, now Colt, Gardner Minshew, who surprise, surprise, he's a highly competent backup. He's right in that cusp of backup to starter. So if Anthony Richardson would get injured at some point, and I don't mean to apply any sort of a jinx to him by uttering those words, but we know it can happen. Gardner Minshew can come in and be a capable replacement, something that the Eagles might not have, especially not in the guy that was playing last night for them, at least as the starter, and didn't play long, Marcus Mariota.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles have a problem there. The Eagles have a real problem there. And the problem with Marcus Mariota is that he just looks like how he's looked since he was going to get replaced by Ryan Tannehill in 2019. And, he came in with the Raiders a couple times and did some things that were all right. When he was back up last year with the Falcons, he did not look very good very often. We saw a lot of that in the quarterback series. He eventually gets replaced and then he shuts it down for the year. But yeah, I mean, look, if you have Gardner Minshew and that guy is also mentoring Anthony Richardson, then you're probably in a good spot. And by all accounts, Gardner Minshew has really embraced that role. And that's something that you want because, look, there's a lot of stuff that Anthony Richardson just does not know about playing quarterback in the NFL. It's not his fault. He's a rookie. But if you can have a guy who's been there, who's been around, who has actually made starts as a rookie and has made starts as he's gone along in the NFL in that progression, and teach him those little things, those little nuances, what to look for and things like that from the quarterback perspective, it's a good thing to have in your locker room.
I got some thoughts on Mariota. I got a theory. I got some ideas. We're going to talk about him later. First, let's hear from Coach Shane Steichen, the former Eagles offensive coordinator, back in town as head coach of the Colts, on the performance of Anthony Richardson in that preseason finale.
I thought he did a solid job. We scored 3 out of the first 4 drives, which is good. The 2-minute drive wasn't what we wanted, but we'll go back, look at the tape. I thought he did some really good things, and some things we got to clean up as well.
How does his ability to avoid sacks, whether it's in the pocket, outside the pocket, just help keep those drives on schedule?
Yeah, I mean that's one of his talents. You create those big plays outside the pocket. I think he had 38 rushing yards, but the scramble plays when guys are coming free on blitzes, obviously we got to look at those and get those things picked up better. But just his ability to create, outside the pocket is definitely going to help us.
Absolutely, and that's what separates the good quarterbacks from the great quarterbacks in today's NFL. The ability to use your legs to extend a play, whether it's to run the ball or whether it is to get out of the pocket and make a throw.
That one.
That's the critical difference.
That one right
there. That was a nice little zip. But, we're going to talk about Trey Lance coming up, but that's what the 49ers thought they were getting in Trey Lance. A guy who wasn't just drop back and throw it. A guy who had the legs to run out of trouble and, if necessary, run down the field. It just never worked because Kyle Shanahan's system isn't conducive to that. Shane Steichen putting in a system specifically for, and that's the difference. You can either have a system that you fully believe in and you insist that your players adapt to it, and if they adapt to it and they apply it, you'll win games, or you can say, here are my players, I'm going to adapt my system to my players. And with Richardson, Steichen, who showed he can adapt the system to Jalen Hurts, he's adapting the system to Anthony Richardson and coaching it well. I see in him, look, I don't want to see a quarterback get hit at all, especially in the preseason. But when he got tackled near the sideline on one of the plays we showed, there was an awareness in the way he went down. There's some of the stuff we're now looking for in Tua Tagovailoa where you just go with it at some point. You don't fight it. And you know how to fall. You know how to hit the ground in a way that doesn't get yourself injured. Jackson Smith-Njigba, where he hurt his wrist earlier in the week. Or we talked about earlier in the week that he's got the broken wrist. He did it last weekend. The way he fell, he should have just gone with it. He tried to brace his fall with his left hand, and he fractured a bone, and he needs surgery. So those are little nuanced things. And when you see a rookie flashing that ability to understand how to go down, how to go with the time. I mean, those are just little things that are like, hey, this kid maybe gets it. This kid, and he's got the talent. The talent's undeniable. You throw in talent with he gets it, and you're going to end up with a pretty good player.
Yeah, you certainly hope so, especially if you combine that with the good coaching. I mean, you mentioned what Shane Steichen did with Jalen Hurts. I mean, you go back a little bit further, right? He was the offensive coordinator and the play caller in the middle of that season. He got thrown into it. But for Justin Herbert, right? This is a guy that has been able to not just produce somebody who we think of as the guy who can throw it and run it, But you look at Justin Herbert and the work he did with him in his rookie year, like that is some serious stuff from a pocket passer too. So we know that Shane Steichen can work with different guys and develop different guys and adapt a system to each and every quarterback that he works with. That's the thing that encourages me the most about the Anthony Richardson situation, aside from what we see with his natural talent. And there is some natural talent there. I mean, that 2nd and 4 throw that we were pointing out, I mean, before that play, he's going to the line, he's making the checks, he's adjusting, he gets back, and then he just throws an absolute rocket to the far sideline. I mean, that is a really, really quality throw, and he puts it in a place where only his receiver can get it. So those are the kinds of things where I see it, and it's like, yeah, you don't want to take too much from preseason, good or bad, but when you see that kind of trait, that to me is the really encouraging aspect of it.
And it's not just having the rocket arm, because, and this was a Trey Lance criticism that Sims had a couple of years ago when we were trying to figure out what he was going to be. Lance used the rocket arm all the time. It's the ability to modulate the velocity, the touch. We're seeing that in Jordan Love. We're seeing that in Anthony Richardson. I mean, that's one of the little things that separates guy who's got a ton of talent from guy who can play quarterback at a high level. So it's a weird time for the Colts with this Jonathan Taylor thing, and the whole Taylor dark cloud may be one of the reasons why they're inclined to try to trade him. I don't know how it's going to play out. Supposedly we'll know by Tuesday, and we'll talk more about it later, but there's reason to be optimistic if you're a Colts fan, because they may have something in Anthony Richardson. We don't know. We won't know for a year or two. But I think back to 2018 all the time. First pick, Baker Mayfield. Third pick, Sam Darnold. 7th pick, Josh Allen. This year, first pick, Bryce Young. 2nd pick, C.J. Stroud. 4th pick, Anthony Richardson. There's a chance that the third guy ends up being the best guy of the three. Time will tell as to all of them. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.